Hello students, this video is for B.Ed second year students. I'm teaching paper titled Creating an Inclusive School. We completed Unit 1 in the previous video lectures, and in this video we are going to begin with Unit 2, which is titled as Legal and Policy Perspectives. We will begin by discussing some international declarations and conventions. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is an international human rights treaty of the UN, that is United Nations, intended to protect the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities. Parties to the convention are required to promote, protect, and ensure the full enjoyment of human rights by persons with disabilities and ensure that they enjoy full equality under the law. The convention has served as the major catalyst in the global movement from viewing persons with disabilities as objects of charity, medical treatment, or social protection towards viewing them as full and equal members of society with human rights. The two major bodies which are directed towards the person with disabilities are Salamanca, which is a Spanish province, Statement and Framework of Action 1994, and the second one is Educational Provisions in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, UNCRPD 2006. Let's begin by discussing the first one. It emerged as a result of deliberations held by more than 300 participants representing 92 governments, including India, and 25 international organizations in 1994, June 1994 to be precise. And the main provisions relating to right to education were these can be summarized into three: reaffirming, recalling, and noting. Reaffirming the right to education of every individual as enshrined in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and renewing the pledge made by the world community at the 1990 World Conference on Education for All to ensure that rights for all regardless of individual differences. Recalling the several UN declarations culminating in the 1993 UN Standard Rules on the Equalization of Opportunities for Persons with Disabilities, and lastly, noting with satisfaction the increased involvement of governments, advocacy groups, community and parent groups, and in particular, organizations of persons with disabilities. They endorsed a framework for action on special needs education that governments and organizations may be guided by the spirit of its provisions and recommendations. This framework of action on special needs was adopted by the World Conference on Special Needs Education organized by Government of Spain in cooperation with UNESCO and held from 7 to 10 June 1994. Its purpose was to inform policy and guide action by governments, international organizations, NGOs, and other bodies in implementing the Statement on Principles, Policy and Practice in Special Needs Education. The framework draws extensively upon the national experience of the participating countries, as well as upon resolutions, recommendations, and publications of the UN system and other intergovernmental organizations, especially the standard rules on the equalization of opportunities for persons with disabilities. The right of every child to an education is proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and was forcefully reaffirmed by the World Declaration on Education for All. The guiding principle that informs this framework is that schools should accommodate all children regardless of their physical, intellectual, social, emotional, linguistic, or other conditions. Some new thinking in special needs as education has the following aspects. The trend in social policy during the past 2 decades has been to promote integration and participation and to combat exclusion. Inclusion and participation are essential to human dignity and to the enjoyment and exercise of human rights. Within the field of education, this is reflected in the development of strategies that seek to bring about a genuine equalization of opportunity. Secondly, education planning by government should concentrate on education for all in all regions of a country and in all economic conditions. Thirdly, in the past, relatively few children with disabilities have had access to education. There are millions of adults with disabilities who lack even the rudiments of basic education. Therefore, a concerned effort is required to teach literacy, numeracy, and basic skills to people with disabilities. Lastly, it is particularly important to recognize that women have often been doubly disadvantaged, bias based on gender compounding the difficulties caused by their disabilities. Women and men should have equal influence on the design of educational programs and the same opportunities to benefit from them. Special efforts should be made to encourage the participation of girls and women with disabilities in educational programs. Some guidelines for action at the national level in terms of policy and organization are integrated education and community based rehabilitation represent complementary and mutually supportive approaches to serving those with special needs. Countries are invited to consider the following actions concerning the policy, including well tested and cost effective approaches to promoting equality of access. Secondly, legislation should recognize the principle of equality of opportunity for children, youth, and adults with disability in primary, secondary, and tertiary education carried out in integrated settings. The priority areas in terms of girls' education should be girls with disabilities are doubly disadvantaged, therefore, special efforts should be put in. Adult and continuing education should also be pressed, and the community perspectives should also be seen. Educational provisions in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities 2006. The short form for this is UNCRPD. So the CRPD entered into force in 2008 and it has been ratified by 125 countries. The convention fosters a very new and fresh understanding of disabilities. Those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual or sensory impairment which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others, which is the article 1 of the same. So it is the CRPD is divided into three parts. The first part consists of transversal provisions ranging from article 1 to 9. Then there are general principles of the convention in article 3, the general obligations of the state party in article 4. Article 5 has rights to equality and non-discrimination. Provisions for women with disabilities in Article 6, children with disabilities Article 7, awareness raising Article 8, accessibility Article 9. Similarly, the second part sets out an exhaustive catalogue of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, taking account of the special needs of persons with disabilities. This ranges from Article 10 to Article 30. And the third part deals with implementation and monitoring, ranging from Article 31 to 40. The rights enshrined in the CRPD can be broadly divided into three: civil and political rights, which includes equality and non-discrimination, right to life, liberty and security of the person, etc. Second is economic, social, and cultural rights, which includes right to education, to health, to rehabilitation, etc. And thirdly, cross-cutting rights, rights of specific groups, rights of persons with disabilities in specific situations. This includes equality and non-discrimination, right to access, a right of women with disabilities, etc. Human rights principles and general principles of the CRPD can be broadly divided into two. That is, human rights principles, for example, non-discrimination, equality of opportunity, participation, empowerment, etc. Second is the general principles of the CRPD, which includes inclusion, accessibility, human diversity, individual autonomy, and independence of persons, etc. So, the CRPD proclaims the right to inclusive education in Article 24, and it puts down various aspects like recognizing the right of persons with disabilities to education, with various views. In the second part of the same, it realizes and asks the state parties to ensure some points. And in the third part, the state parties enable person with disability to learn life and social development skills. This is ensured. And such, the human rights based approach to disability given by the UN has some core principles, which are number one, equality and non discrimination, participation and empowerment, and thirdly, transparency and accountability. Development cooperation needs to address the multiple barriers to the inclusion of persons with disabilities, which include physical, attitudinal, and communication barriers. So, this can be done by enhancing respect for persons with disabilities, by ensuring accessibilities, by addressing non discrimination, equality of opportunity, and gender equality, promoting and ensuring the rights of children with disabilities, promoting and ensuring participation and empowerment of persons with disabilities, and strengthening accountability. In the next class, we are going to discuss education of students with disabilities in terms of various policies. We will discuss the constitutional provisions present in the Constitution of India, and we will study other policies related to the same. Until then, if you have any doubt, you're very welcome. The details have been provided below.